At this point, I'd like to introduce Mike Fox. Mike's been working with the PDC on collecting information about agreements and expectations across the country with relation to, first, I believe, mostly with First Nations and also with the industry about where agreements might go collectively for exploration, among other things. Mike is principal of Fox High Impact Consulting, a national firm specializing in Aboriginal processes, participation, and partnership development in the energy and minerals sector. He brings a wealth of experience in structuring projects, partnership, and financing from early stage engagement through later stage formal consultation with First Nations. In his previous employment, he assisted Northern Ontario First Nations with economic development initiatives within the main natural resource development sectors of Ontario, forestry, energy, and mining. He has facilitated joint ventures and partnership arrangements between First Nations and industry. In addition, he has acted as one of the key liaison persons between First Nations project proponents and governmental agencies, as well as facilitated capacity building initiatives. He obtained a post-secondary education in business administration and an honors degree in political science, with the latter being primarily focused on natural resource development in Ontario and Aboriginal law. He is originally from the Winnusk First Nation, and he has twin boys and a daughter, and he also sits with me on the Mining Act Advisory Committee, where some of our conversations with the government are quite interesting. Without any further introduction, Mike. Sure.
Thank you. I want to thank the organizers and Bill for asking me to share some remarks. I just wanted to ask in the crowd, how many of you guys have engaged with Aboriginal communities right now, or have as well? So it's about half for those online. How many in the rooms attended the Canadian Aboriginal Mineral Association conference the last couple of days in the room? Okay, there's several of you guys. I think the attendance there was 700. That's the highest attendance level the CAMA has had, and it shows you the interest, right, both on the industry goods. I think I was trying to figure out the percentage there of government, industry, and First Nation or Aboriginal community reps that are there. I have a feeling it's about like sort of one-third, one-third, one-third. But that's the nexus, right, between Crown communities and companies, and they're all kind of figuring out how this stuff works and sharing their best practice, and that's why those panels and presentations at the CAMA is done. We sort of, I say we, I guess the PDAC and those at the Aboriginal Affairs Committee, which some of you good folks in the crowd sit on, at the PDAC, we kind of look for good speakers, good stories, and good role models and good successes, and I think there was many there in the last couple of days. That could bring good insight and good processes, I guess, around how to deal with the complexities around them. You know, the more I learn about industry, and that's the reason why I joined the industry associations, I actually hang around experts about their business, and because I didn't know. You know, I had a starting point around my own capacity building, and I thought those you want to know something about aviation, you join the aviation folks, right? And you want to know about the mineral sector, you hang around people who know that racket, and that's what. Sorry, I don't mean to say racket, but that's the case, right? You surround yourself with people that know about mineral exploration, development, evaluation, environmental assessment, and all that kind of stuff, so that I can be more well versed, and so I can inform others around things I've learned. And I think at the PDAC, with the leadership of Don Bubarb and Glenn Nolan in the beginning of creating the Aboriginal Affairs Committee, I think we do that very well. And the uptake around the Aboriginal community or the Aboriginal program there is also shows it based on the numbers and the overflow that's there by Aboriginal communities across the country. And the interest level here shows, even on the industry side, about those have to deal with Aboriginal rights and interests across the country on this project are indicative of that kind of stuff. The more I learn about, I get the Aboriginal stuff because I grew up in a community in the far north, up in the Hudson Bay, a community called Winnusk. I know the pre-existing challenges there, the pre-existing grievances, the pre-existing historical evolution, how they came to be. So that's not my learning curve, right? All this stuff's kind of, when I talk to an Aboriginal community, we got a shared understanding, right? And so that's not where I kind of learn. I like learning about the technical commercial complexities of trying to move a project along. Along with that pre-existing commercial technical complexities is this layers of social legal complexities now, right? And that's where I think where everybody's sort of looking at this Rubik's Cube and how you go about solving it. So hopefully I can share some stuff. You know, the more we talk with each other, and the more I'm able to conceptualize. A lot of things I do is kind of reduce things down to digestible chunks for Aboriginal communities, so they have, you know, at least an intuitive understanding of complex pieces around the world. You know, so you know when Chinese show up around their community, why are they here? Right? Well, they're looking for things that are happening around the world, and a lot of times they can't make the local connection with the global forces that are why they're showing up at their door, or why a junior's now looking at them. So one of the things I try to do is sort of conceptualize things. So you know, what motivates the mineral sector? Oh, a number of things, right? Economic opportunities, land access, corporate social responsibility. So I try to reduce down what are the interests and imperatives of different parties. The Aboriginal communities, you know, what are their motivators and drivers these days? Well, you know, they're trying to deal with, you know, sort of duty consultant infringement of their rights, trying to overcome the exclusionary practice of certain industry in the past and deal with the poor socio-economic conditions that they face every day. And the public discourse that happens is sort of one end, sort of free entry, you know, by the mineral sector, and then free prior informed consent on the other. Mineral rights on one end, Aboriginal rights on the other, treaty surrender or treaty sharing. So you have different public discourses happening that you read about, and companies are sort of in the middle, right, trying to figure out what do we do, because they're in the larger public policy context, governments are actually trying to do something. They're trying to, you know, recognize, do rights recognition and protection on the Constitution and the policies and the thing, as it manifests across the jurisdiction. They're trying to, you know, figure out the inclusionary process to overcome the historical exclusionary practices that happen, and they're trying to deal with the socioeconomic conditions through poverty reduction programs, economic development or business development support or startup. And I think a lot of us, Sheridan, you know, talked about what they're doing, what she did out in BC, in developing tools, resources, and is the bridging function. You know, a lot of what I do as a practitioner is I'm a bridge. I provide a bridging function on these sort of two solitudes, I guess, for lack of a better word. And the problem with being a bridge is you get walked on both sides, right? So you sort of get a thick hide in the process, right? So this is the different sides of the consultation Rubik's Cube, right? At the end of the day, it's duty to consult. But the four, I think I look at it, the four sides, you're trying to build relationships, you're trying to deal with the expectations of benefits, you're trying to deal with capacity, and you're trying to deal with this accommodation. So the reason why you're there is because what Sheridan was talking about is this constitutional imperative, right? You got the duty to consult. But the discussions around relationship, around benefits, around capacity, around accommodation, that's the different sides of the Rubik's Cube, and I think, you know, everybody kind of solves it differently, right? Based on the scale and the size and complexity of your project. So, in the spirit of reconciliation, as Sheridan was talking about, I mean, a lot of I think it started prior to the Supreme Court decisions. I mean, we did have pre-existing agreements that happened across Canada and elsewhere in Alaska, and these are some of them. So these existed prior to the Supreme Court decisions around the duty to consult or the spirit of reconciliation, pre-existing societies, as well as the assertion, or pre-existing society and this assertion of Crown sovereignty. And so I just point this out that it's not a new thing. The only thing about these ones, they were advanced projects, right? They were mature projects, and they were trying to deal with things. And why they existed, well, they were sort of this, you know, they didn't call it accommodation, but basically they were trying to deal with something that the environmental assessment didn't deal with, right? There's social cultural interests on the land. So how do you deal with that when it's not in scope? So something up and above the EA process. Today that's different, right? The duty consult is actually built into the environmental assessment now, right? Through traditional land use studies and all that. That's not wasn't the case before, and that's why these agreements prior to the Supreme Court's case existed. So in the new emerging context, I won't get into it, but like I said it was earlier, I get the pre-existing issues and the grievance, the pre-development requirements are inconsistent what people believe they should be happening, pre-project expectations across, as well as presumptions of project viability is assumed, especially at the early stage. If you're grassroots or you're just trying to punch a few holes in the ground, people think you're building a mine, right? The communities, they're just this presumption that you have an economic deposit, when that is not indeed the case, and you're left with different starting points in the discussion, right? And proponents are left to define or defend a joint process with the community, as you try to, fulfill the procedural aspects of the duty consult. So that's the emerging and sort of around the thing. The challenging part, right, across the country is the procedural aspect. So the court said, we can delegate. What does that mean? Basically, that's sort of the delegated certain aspects of the process. Delegation, which really means is sort of downloading the transactional cost of doing it, right? So okay, you got to do it. Well, it's expensive to go up there, right? Like to go up north and say, well, I did it once, did it twice, did it 7 times. When is it adequate, right? So like for some jurisdictions, that is indeed the case, like as in Ontario. In other cases, it's actually the Crown. Like Manitoba government doesn't delegate. It's the Crown that does the consultation. And so the transactional cost is like the community's demanding capacity. We don't have the capacity to do this. So who provides capacity? There's 2 Supreme Court decisions that hasn't happened, which makes this whole thing challenging, right? One, they haven't decided who has the duty to provide capacity, right? Which is the big talk around, we can't do this, we need capacity. That's number one, it's very determined. The other one is the duty to accommodate a substantial duty? And if so, then it's with the Crown. But because we haven't had a Supreme Court decision on that, that's what becomes challenging around what's the benefit challenge, the benefit talk with with the community. Because if that's part of the accommodation, then if it's a substantial duty and it can't be delegated, then it's with the Crown. So the company, in the meantime, everybody's kind of responding differently. You got good actors and you got bad actors, and you got the sort of the silent, muddling way through what I call the sort of operating in this functional ambiguity. In the meantime, and you got the best practice, like Don Blue Barb and others, that are moving forward what we call best practices, and we showcase that at the PDAC, which I think we're victims of our own success, right? That was all good with the super cycle, but now the super cycle is over. Suddenly the standards that were set out when money was flowing everywhere, suddenly the same expectations there, right? Suddenly they want IBA provisions and early benefits agreements. So like all the goodies over here, they want it earlier, right? And that's pretty tough, and the market's as tough it is. Yeah, so I think one of the things the community, one of the toughest things to articulate to the Aboriginal communities is their reciprocal duty. So you show up, right? What is their reciprocal duty? It's not articulated by their lawyers very well, if at all, right? They can frustrate or they can facilitate, and most, I'll let you guys decide. But they got certain responsibilities, right, as Aboriginal communities. They're there to help identify their rights and interests on the land, right? They're there to identify any impacts and infringement based on project size, scale, what have you, and if not, identify any options to accommodate, mostly mitigation, right? So early stage stuff is mostly mitigation. If there's a permanent loss of use of land, whatever it is that you're looking at, then you're looking at compensation. So accommodation is 2 dimensions: mitigation and compensation. And so financial compensation really has to be at the advanced, mature stage. But some of the things, creative things that has been done by companies around shares and warrants and all that kind of as part of the financial participation, I guess you can call it, versus financial compensation in the project. So yeah, so this is sort of it's not highlighted often by the advisors of communities. In fact, I was sharing this yesterday. You know, there's two types of advisors around Aboriginal communities. There's the grievance experts, legitimate, right? You got grievance experts that, you know, land claims and flooding and all that kind of stuff. And then you got process junkies. You know, they're all about process, and you know, and you're talking to a recovering one here. Now I'm a project advisor, right, which is completely different, and they lack that across Canada. There's not too many project advisors on the community end. They're either grievance experts or they're process junkies, and they're peeling off their piece, you know, during the process, right? So, capacity building for what? So we talked about capacity. So this is where it gets challenging, right? So there's two types of capacity. There's the capacity to understand the project and the capacity requirements to participate in the process. Two different types of capacity requirements, and it's still not, and you got to be pretty clear what you're supporting, and for what at the end. So a Crown rep shows up, their primary motivation is actually to consult, right? They're trying to do adequacy and all that kind of stuff, and for what end? Largely project mitigation measures. So it's, you know, at the end, it's really social acceptance of the project. Or the company, they're motivated maybe CSR, right, like corporate social responsibility. So at the end of the thing, you know, are they there? So depending on the party, and depending on what jurisdiction you're in, are they there for social acceptance or to create social enterprise? And there's that's a different set of discussions. When having, you know, joint tables or multiple parties, and it's not clear sometimes by the Aboriginal communities why the other party's talking to them, right? And the more you make that clear, I think the more the process unfolds a lot differently. I share this, you know, I took a WIN economics course when energy was the thing of the day in Ontario when they were deregulating, and part of my own capacity is figure out, you know, the economic models of these projects. And so I kind of was looking at this, you know, it was the conceptual pre-fees, you know, 40, 50%, feasibility, you know, you get the cost, you know, 15 to 20. It's never under, right? It's always over. You have to see a project under budget. Pre-tender, and then you actually get the final cost. I actually took this and redid it. So conceptual, so take any resource-based project. In the beginning, the value is always in the data, right? Nothing, it's not not construction financing or whatever. It's always data generation, and you kind of move it in. So the assets in the data. So so your early stage, you're the junior coming in. You know, I just kind of redacted this a bit, and so you're coming in with a concept. You did some, you know, historical stuff, put it together, and, you know, get the 43-101. Suddenly, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go explore. Boy, the permit says I got to go talk to these guys. So you're here. And you only got so much information, but the challenge is that communities, here's the information levels, and communities want to know, well, what's the impacts, assuming that, you know, it's an advanced project, right? And we're like, well, we're not there. We're actually over here. The information levels, like, this is all we have right now. We think there's something there. We hope there's something there, as we told our investors, but we want to do some work. And in order to answer your question, we actually got to do this work. Our information level is this much, but we want to get over here so we can answer some of your questions. Or the talks about benefit. Well, what's in it for us? Some are jumping to something that they think and presume that it's an economic viable project, right? So the challenge is, oops, you know, how do you answer these questions when you're over here, early stage stuff? You know, and that's tough because that becomes the collective journey between the companies, the Crown, and the communities around what this process is about. And you got people in this room that's on this journey. I'm just articulating sort of the general trends and things. So the best practice I think that's being on is trying to put these early stage agreements, they're called letter of intents, MOUs, participation agreements, IBAs. And it's through these agreements, through the different levels of stages of information, whatever, that sort of governs the activities and governs the relationship between the two parties, right? That's been the practice. There's nothing legally required by you, except for maybe the self-government agreements. that are out there, but they're few. But the most of Canada don't have that. So the good actors, the proactive folks that are out there that started this practice, right? That's out there where there's no legal requirement. Meanwhile, the requirements like this low, but the practice is over here, and that's the disparity I think caused by the super cycle. I would say that it's becoming way more challenging today than it was, say, 5 years ago, because of these global firms and internet and all that kind of stuff. I was teaching at Queen's University. It was a postgraduate thing, and community relations specialists from the big companies around the world. So I was part of the I don't want to call myself professor, instructor, and so there, they had, and we have that challenge in our CSR E3 Plus N3. They have guidance notes around the community. They have community engagement guidance, and they got community development. And these folks were international, right? They're community practitioners that deal with project level communities, villages in deserts or in South America, whatever. So they actually deal with stuff. That practice between community engagement versus community development, providing government-related type of services for a village or for water or whatever, that's kind of trickling down to like the Canadian context, which is consultation and accommodation. Right? So when that discourse kind of trickles down to the local level, this international phenomena that happens with in other countries suddenly is being sort of internalized or domesticated here in our context. Suddenly they're expecting government or companies to provide government-related provisions of services, and that becomes another challenge for companies and for communities reading about global companies picking up juniors or what they provided elsewhere. So I think that's it, and hopefully I provided some insight. You, Rich?
One of the comments that Mike made that I found interesting is what we tell our communities that we're engaged with and what we tell our investors. Seeing as the internet is such an interesting and equal place for everyone to come and access your opinions, it really doesn't do you justice to, say so many glowing things about your project on the internet and then go and tell a community that it's really just a small steps, just a protocol thing for all of you out there managing websites.